Right, let's talk about the battle over the Broadway Plan now, the controversial housing plan along the Broadway corridor. This is one of the biggest and most ambitious plans of its kind in the history of Vancouver. And we're talking huge scale here. You're talking hundreds of city blocks along the Broadway corridor. The plan is to build.
Hundreds of Vancouverites swarmed City Hall over the weekend, urging councillors to halt the Broadway expansion. Protest organizers say more than 2,800 people have signed a petition to pause and rethink the mega project.
It's not in my backyard, NIMBY, versus yes in my backyard, YIMBY.
The Helena Gutteridge Plaza outside City Hall was flooded with local residents on Saturday, demanding change to the City of Vancouver's Broadway Plan.
Hi, my name is Theodore Abbott. I'm your host of On-Site Report, and today I have with me my guest, Michael Fergusson. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Hey Theodore. Michael Fergusson. I have been living in Vancouver for a long time. I first moved to East Vancouver at 11th and St. Catharines in 1984, and I've been living in and around here ever since, with a few little stints away in Europe and the eastern seaboard of the U.S., But I start companies. So I'm an entrepreneur. I start businesses. I've raised 4 kids here, and my parents live here. And my kids, unfortunately, are not able to afford to live in this city, and have moved to other places. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. I mean, this is an important topic, and I love talking about it. I think we can make the city better. I think we can solve this problem.
Yeah.
And I think we can tell these land speculators to get lost.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they should be making. There's no law of nature that says you need to make a huge fortune from speculating land. It's a place for people to live. Let's just build houses for people. It's okay if we don't get rich.
Funny, funny, funny what money can do.
Yeah, well, I just want to start by saying that I've been on the hunt for like a 512 square foot apartment that I could pay like at least $1 million for. I think that would be really great. And then I could rent it out for like $3,500 a month to some, entry-level software engineers at Microsoft. I think that's the future of this city.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only future of the city.
that's the only kind of housing that we appear to be building.
You mentioned, those were a couple snippets from just a few of the mainstream media coverage.
Yeah.
I guess you could call that was City News, CKNW. That's mainstream.
Yeah.
And they referred to us as swarming and flooding.
Swarming and flooding.
Which I don't know if we did either of those things. We certainly didn't swarm, though.
Yeah.
At the beginning, the cops came up to me. The VPD came up to me before the rally, and they said, "Are you planning to raid City Hall or occupy City Hall?" And I said, "Probably not." And then they asked, "Are you planning to rally, like march?" And I said, "You guys better stop because you're giving me some good ideas." And then they walked away.
Maybe we could swarm or perhaps flood.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I wanted to have you on the show because you were there.
Mm-hmm.
You were a participant and you witnessed the Pause the Plan rally.
Yes, I did.
Which was on November 23rd.
And read a lot of really terrible commentary about it after, and some not so bad commentary too.
Yeah, and you were on Reddit too. You've been sort of in some Reddit rabbit holes.
Yeah, I've been down the Reddit hole. Yeah.
So, but first, just tell me. Yeah, give me your. Let's do a little debrief. This is On-Site Report, Pause the Plan, Broadway Plan rally debrief episode. So, what did you think?
Well, I thought the rally was very good. I mean, you get a whole bunch of people together to talk about something that people have been thinking about for a long time or super emotional about. you can get you can get people flying off in all directions, right? You can get people with signs saying crazy things and people shouting stuff at the speakers and people disagreeing with each other. I thought it was a very consistent perspective. And I talked to a lot of people. I made a point of walking around and talking to a bunch of people. And what people were saying is, we are not opposed to building. We are not opposed to density. We know that the city is growing. It has to change. And this is a fact of life. But we don't have to accept the premise that the only way that our city can change is to turn Broadway into a steel and glass corridor of, sardine can apartments that get rented for $3,500 a month. I mean, that's not any kind of vision for the city. And I thought that the people that were there, yes, they are worried about changes to their neighborhoods. That shouldn't be an insult. That I love my neighborhood, and I'd like to maintain its character. So people were concerned about that. But this was not a NIMBY, no, we don't want anything, no building kind of crowd. This was, I thought, some very pragmatic people who were just upset that people who don't live in the city and who aren't tenants, who aren't homeowners, who aren't employees of businesses here, but are developers and landowners and speculators are driving the agenda. And I think people are rightly upset about that.
Yeah. One thing that was heartening for me about the event is that we had housing advocates from every end of the city. We had the West Point Grey Residents Association. Mm-hmm. We had the folks from Kitts. We had people from far out in East Van.
Which is where we're sitting right now.
Which is where we are right now. Grandview Woodland Area Council was there. Folks from Mount Pleasant. And so I thought there was a good representation, especially of renters and homeowners.
Yep.
And there was also representation from the Yimbys. The Yimbys were there.
Yes.
The Russell Vong was there, and they had a tent set up. And you kind of did you interact with them on the day of?
I did. I think Yimby's given them a lot of credit. They seem more like yes in your backyard.
Yeah.
Not yes in my backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, that's an important dimension of this entire discussion because a lot of these people, as we know, don't live in the city of Vancouver. Yeah. A lot of the Yimbys, one of them came up to me. He's a younger guy, and he said, I'm from White Rock. And he tried to play like he was innocent and somewhat innocuous. He was like, I don't really know about this whole situation. Can you explain it to me? So a lot of them don't live here.
I just decided to come up from White Rock for a rally.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And so they play dumb, but the Yimbys the Yimbys were there. And I guess you're right. It is generous to call them Yimbys, but the abundant housing people were there, and they had their tent.
Yeah. And, what a great name, right? Who can argue with abundant housing?
Yeah.
But I think the issue that I have with it is not the abundance part, is the housing part. They're not really talking about housing. 498 square feet is not a house. You can't raise a family there. You can't, you can't have more than one person in something that size. Do we really want our city to be full of just these little spaces that are not big enough to have families or children or live in, and just people just live here for a few years and then move to the suburbs so that they can raise their family? We want to have neighborhoods that have families and vibrant life, schools, parks.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we could have an abundance of that kind of housing, I'm completely on board.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that articulates and that dovetails well with what planners, critics of this new kind of planning, which isn't planning, it's anti-planning. They just call it unit counting. That's what the city's doing. And that's what the Broadway Plan achieves. The Broadway Plan right now is setting out, it's 100% purpose-built rentals, but they're destroying a lot of purpose-built rentals in the name of more purpose-built rentals, which will be less affordable. But it's just counting units, and that's why you see them getting smaller and smaller. There's been this really interesting shrinkflation with housing units, and a lot of people refer to them as crates. This is also why the renter protections are such BS, because you're supposedly getting the same rent, but it's not the same rent if you're getting a unit that's 50% smaller. You're paying more rent based on the square footage of that unit. But so they call it counting units, and they aren't really building. They're not building housing, and one of the observations that my grandma actually made on the day of, I had a long debrief with her after the rally, and she said it was very fitting that the YIMBY, the abundant housing people, had their tent set up and had food, because obviously they want to be perceived as the ones with shelter and food. And that's just it's so symbolic of their position. Right. And I thought that was an incredibly poetic observation to make, is like, we had all these people standing out in the weather, and these abundant housing creeps were the ones under the tent and protected. And that's how they would like it to continue. Like, so there's good imagery there. Yeah, let's hear a clip actually from this is Gail Davidson, a longtime activist, human rights, civil rights lawyer, and also my grandmother.
I would like to say that the Broadway Plan was done without proper consultation, but it's also done without disclosure of any data that would necessitate the building of all these towers. So they say, well, we need more housing, but we never hear a figure. How many people need housing right now? Nobody talks about all the people lying on the street, on the actual pavement. There isn't one bit of housing for those people. And they're using the word housing in a way that this is a way to shelve people permanently, but they're not talking about people's need and their right to have a home, somewhere that the person could move in and say, this is my home now, I can stay here. I can stay here after I get a partner. I can stay here after I have a child or a dog or a cat. But if you're living in 375 square feet at 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever it is, dollars a month, and they're not even looking at any of the current data. So, for instance, at Larch and Second, that building is 40% empty. And why is it 40% empty? It's empty because even the supposed 20% below market value homes are way too expensive for anybody. So and also another thing that people aren't talking about is the fact that, can we look at any city in the world where a housing deficiency has been solved through for-profit development? No, that's not going to happen. It would be, you're getting back to Jonathan Swift's, how could you raise babies for profit? Well, you could fatten them up and sell them for food. So it's not a good proposal for a solution. And all of the really so intelligent proposals that were made before City Council last week, they basically should have been receiving those kinds of thoughtful, well-researched suggestions and comments before the plan was ever made. That's what democracy is about. So I would say don't pause the Broadway Plan. I would say scrap it.
Well, I see where you get it from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's thoughtful.
Yeah.
That is a thought. Those are thoughtful comments. I think you're one of the first people that I heard refer to the Broadway Plan as supply side economics. Like that voodoo economics from the 80s. Just like, how do we solve this problem? Well, you have people make money from it. That's how you solve the problem. Having people making money from things is not a solution.
It's the foundation there is, and if you would go back and listen to the Mike Smith interview, that he's like, build, don't we need more housing? It's very sensationalized. And the underlying assumption is that more housing makes things cheaper. Like, the more supply equals affordability, which we just know isn't the case. If that was the case, then Vancouver would have some of the cheapest housing in North America, because we've added 3x to our housing supply in the last 40 years, or something crazy like that. So it's not, you have to break that assumption that people's thinking is, they think supply and demand, more supply equals lower costs. But housing doesn't work like that. You have to provide the right kind of housing, the right type. Exactly. And like you said, you didn't talk to anyone there. I didn't talk to anyone there. Well, there was one person there who I think
there was that one dude. I'm opposed. He's like, we're not opposed to building. He's like, I am.
Should we? Okay, so this guy's sign at the rally said "No growth." Can we hear it? Let's pull that up.
I mean, I don't mean to make fun of the guy.
There are only two people here that I know of that are against growth.
Yeah.
So Patrick Condon said nobody here is against slow growth or moderate growth or something like that. I am. I'm for no growth. So I'm an extremist. But I want to ally with these people because we're all against the Broadway plan. Now, I was the chair of the Green Party of Vancouver at one time, but now they've gone for growth. They had 3 councillors. Do you know them?
Who were on city council?
Yeah, they had 3. Now they have 2.
On the Green Party?
Yes.
Pete Fry?
Pete Fry, yeah.
I don't know the others.
And Adrian Carr.
Okay, yeah.
And Michael Weeb lost. So of those 3, 2 voted for the Broadway plan. The 2 that got reelected. Michael Weeb voted against it. He was defeated. So we are extremists, Michael and I.
So what do you mean by no growth? Like no more housing?
No.
Zero housing growth.
Yeah. Well, maybe 1% or something. Nothing that's going to harm the environment. See, all world growth, all population growth anywhere in any country is harming the environment. So I'm an extreme green.
Extreme green.
Extreme green. Okay. I mean, that's a perspective.
Yeah.
And I think one that probably deserves to get ridiculed a little less than it does. I think there's lots of reasons to think that we as a species can get a lot smarter about how we're interacting with the planet and how we're managing it. But I'm not sure you solve that problem through housing policy in the city of Vancouver necessarily. But
yeah. I mean, and it's fair. We have to. I think it's good to just give his voice a platform. That's not the position of the movement. The position of the movement isn't no growth, but it's just good to highlight that we had those people there. We had the no growth, and we had people who I'm sure would be fine with some towers, and we had people that would, die on that hill, trying to fight the tower in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, like what the demands for the rally were, like mid-rise height limitations in areas where there are no high-rises currently. We also wanted, and we're requesting a moratorium, a freeze on rezonings and demolitions for pre-existing, mid-rise purpose-built rentals. And then just a reorienting of the plan to include like a meaningful consultation process where neighborhoods aren't seen as just like a hurdle or a barrier. And they're actually used as a guide, which goes back. I mean, this GWAC had this, KITS had this. We've had what was called City Plan in for years, and we've moved to a top-down approach to planning. But we used to have that, and it was all about, like, as Colleen Hartwick would say, growth management versus promotion of growth for profit, and just managing growth in a way that's at pace and at scale with increased population. But the Broadway plan, it just takes a totally different approach, and I think it symbolizes. The thing is, I want people to be like mad about the Broadway plan, and I think people. I don't want to be a fearmonger, but I think people should be upset because it's Michael Geller was talking about this the other day. A lot of folks have been making the comparison between the Broadway plan and the highway that would have busted through this very studio that we're sitting in the late 1960s.
That would have promoted growth.
Yeah, it would have promoted growth.
Definitely would have had a lot of growth from that.
Yeah.
I think you're pointing out something which is really true. Like the extreme position here, is that we should have growth at all costs, at any cost. That growth is in and of itself good. Growth is not in and of itself good. Growth is the natural result of people having children and moving to a city. I mean, it's one of the things that happens, but that doesn't make it a good. Like that is not a thing that we should be deliberately trying to get is growth of that type. think we want to, I think you said manage the growth well, and have a livable, healthy city that's got heart, that has teachers that live there and nurses and and home care workers, and daycares. I mean, we're moving to be a city that can't have any of those things. And if that is what growth means that we're going to drive out, press out, push out the heart of the city in the form of nurses and teachers and musicians and artists. Well, I don't want that. That is an extreme position, I think, that we should be fighting against. I mean, we should really be resisting that.
Yeah. And I think when the Broadway plan first passed, folks thought that it would be like some density in some towers along the Broadway corridor proper.
Well, I think that's what it was. I think that's how it got sold.
Yeah. And now it's 16th Avenue. It stretches up south to 16th Avenue and north all the way to First, and it's Vine to Clark. So it's 500 square blocks of the city. The Broadway plan encompasses some of the most valuable purpose-built rentals, 3-story, 4-story walk-ups in the entire city. I think it's an incredible portion of those purpose-built rentals.
Yeah.
It's going to just potentially displace thousands of people. It already is, and it will continue to. That's why it was pause the plan, and it is pause the plan, is because we would like to be taken seriously, and for the plan to actually change, it has to change in a lot of ways, but it's not about no growth. It's never been about no growth. I don't think there's only very few people like who we heard, the guy who we heard from, that would actually say no growth.
Yeah, I don't know where this idea of no growth really comes from either, right? I mean, people are talking about the way the city is organized right now and the way that our zoning sits now, as if there is no capacity for growth inside the zoning that we currently have. We have the capacity to nearly triple the population of Vancouver inside our existing zoning envelopes. Yeah. So why do we need spot rezonings? Well, I think if you take a look at the city budget, you'll see why. Spot rezonings and fees from developers have gone from a trivial single-digit percentage of the city's budget to 50% of the city's budget from fees from developers. Of course, they want to see, they want the zoning changes because that lifts the value of the underlying land, which is excellent for the people who are speculating on the land. And the city wants the upzoning because they get all this money to spend on quote-unquote council priorities. But it is completely unnecessary. We have zoning. Zoning is a promise. We moved into these neighborhoods with the existing zoning telling us that what we can and cannot do. And then the city has said, well, actually, that's only for you little people. If you have enough money to bribe us, you can change the zoning to be anything you want.
Yeah.
That is unconscionable. I mean, it's corruption just right out in the open. And Ken Sim meeting with people for $100 a seat to talk about development opportunities in Vancouver just reinforces how completely alienated from actual citizens and the actual lives of individual people who are trying to make their lives, build families, create communities here in Vancouver.
Yeah, just for context, the event that Michael's referring to was last night, and it was at, of course, it was at the former Trump Tower. It was at the Paradox Hotel, because you wouldn't choose any other. No. And also, just on that note, this comes within the week that Ken Sim announced his new Bitcoin-friendly city.
I got orange-pilled about 5 years ago. I think it's the greatest invention ever in human history.
Where they spelt city in the proposal. They spelt it wrong. And so he couldn't even get his own motion spelled right. So anyways, this connects well with Eric Villagomez article that was recently written in Spacing Magazine that I want to bring attention to. It's called When Care Becomes Control, The Hidden Violence of Urban Planning. Mm-hmm. And he talks about this subject of how zoning has become this weapon. And rezoning and upzoning has become a mechanism that exacerbates gentrification, and it divides communities, it drives people out, and it often is done in this incredibly insidious way. It's done under the promise of care. Mm-hmm. It's done with the promise of no, we're making this affordable. And that's the most insidious part of the Broadway plan, is that it will fail to provide the very thing it purports to deliver, which is affordability and affordable housing. And we just can't. I mean, there's, as you know, there's these people who have really drank the Kool-Aid and have gone and accepted the supply side economics of it, but it's a huge problem, and it's just a classic instance. This is not a phenomenon that's unique to Vancouver. California has had this happen. They've had their fair share of Broadway plans, north and south, and in every instance, it's resulted in communities getting ravaged, people getting displaced, and the working Joe, the rank and file, end up taking the brunt of it.
Yeah. Do we really want to use San Francisco as our model for building Vancouver? Or should we be maybe looking at other cities like maybe Stockholm, maybe Vienna? You know, there are other options. You know, it is not some ineluctable force of nature that says that somebody should be able to become a billionaire from real estate. Mm-hmm. That is a choice that we are making. What if, this is a crazy idea, I recognize, but let's just consider it for a second. What if you couldn't become a billionaire speculating on real estate in Vancouver? What if you were merely limited to simply just becoming fabulously wealthy instead of like astronomically wealthy? What if you could just become very rich? How about that? Just building things that people want, that there's demand for, and people want to live in. You know, what's wrong with our rental housing stock being outside the market, you know, being owned by nonprofits, being owned by co-ops, and built by for-profit developers who may very well be able to wring every last cent of profit out of building the thing. But that's not a reason that you should turn housing, the house that you just built, into some kind of asset to be exploited, to be financialized and exploited. And it is the financialization of housing that is driving people out. Right, it is causing the very scarcity that we're talking about here, as you just pointed out, and it's that financialization that is hurting us.
And it's not. Guess what? It is not causing the housing crunch. It's not public hearings.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not, and it's not NIMBYs. Like there are true NIMBYs.
Sure.
It's not NIMBYs. It's not public hearings, and it's not the cost of building. And there are so many things. There are so many aspects of the process, interest groups that they get pointed at, and folks say this is why it's so expensive, because the NIMBYs are preventing it from getting built or what have you, and that's not it. It's not the cost of build. If the cost of construction was so high that they couldn't build, there would be no building happening. but like drive around. This is one of the things
there would be no billionaires.
Yeah, like there would be no billionaires
owning hockey teams and
exactly
making all their money on real estate. It's preposterous.
And just the assertion that these people make that, oh yeah, like this is the newest one is the public hearing, right? Mm-hmm. The public hearing has come under attack recently from people like Yute Lee or SFU Center for Dialogue has this initiative called Renovate the Public Hearing, and it's a little sus. Like alarm bells were going off for me when I was learning about that, because there is lots of housing getting built. Like 99% of rezonings for new developments that go to the City of Vancouver get approved. Mm-hmm. So it's not the public hearing that's holding this thing up. Yeah. It's not the people who were swarming City Hall, us, demanding for a pause the plan. The housing crunch and the so-called housing crisis, even though it's not a crisis, is not due to NIMBYs. Yeah. That's absolutely not the case.
Yeah, and if there is a problem with public hearings, it's that they are set up to fail from the start. So I live near Kingsway and Fraser, and I may not want a 25-story building built on the corner of Kingsway and Fraser in a neighborhood that is just full of single-family homes for the most part, and some low-rise along the Kingsway corridor. I may not want a 28-story tower to be built there, but that doesn't mean that I would prefer that strip mall. Mm-hmm. I mean, nothing against the people who own that strip mall. I'm glad they were provided a service to the community for a long time. But, you don't have to build a 20. That's not the only choice we have.
Yeah.
If the public hearing was really consulting the neighborhood, it would ask, do you want this tower? No, what would you prefer? Like what would work here
Yeah.
for the community? What, I mean, that's, I guess we have the zoning, and the zoning is in part the answer to that question. The zoning says 6 stories here.
Yeah.
And that means the neighborhood agreed to that. So they could just do that. So maybe that's the thing, right? Is it is really an attack on the agreement that we already made about how we wanted the city to be built.
And you know what they zone it. What they do is they say that they rezone it for highest and best use. That's the terminology that the city of Vancouver uses, and what it means is the most valuable use, the most profitable use.
Yeah.
Because once you take if you take a lot that's even zoned for 6 stories, and you rezone it for 28 or 30, well, you've taken a lot that might be worth 10 million, and now that lot's worth 25, 35, 40 million dollars.
And that's what you have to pay tax on.
Exactly. And this is the way that the inflation works. And this is the way that land inflation, and I know, land inflation isn't the sexiest topic to talk about, but for Vancouverites, people should pay attention because it's been a really important dimension of how we've arrived at where. So yeah, like we have this zoning, and 6 stories is great. Like I'm a real believer in the 4 to 8, the mid-rise, and a big part of the Pause the Plan rally was to, and I hope that we did this successfully, was to properly articulate the alternatives. Michael, I'm really glad we could have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. I think we covered a lot of ground. Charlie, what do you think? Yeah, good.
Free.
Awesome.
Unregulated. Capitalism. Free. Unregulated. Capitalism. Free. Unregulated. Capitalism. Free. Unregulated. Capitalism.